Hello, and welcome to Baltic Ways, a podcast bringing you interviews and insights from the world of Baltic studies. I'm your host, Indra Ekmanis. Today, we bring you a bonus episode from our partners at the Europass project, featuring political scientist Professor Jan Kubik of Rutgers University, hosted by Professor Violeta Davoliūtė of Vilnius University and the Lithuanian Institute of History, and Professor Dovilė Budrytė of Gwinnett College and Director-at-Large of the Association for the Advancement of Baltic Studies. In this episode, The Battle for Memory, Pluralism versus Populism in Public History, these scholars explore the intersection of political populism and the misuse of history. Stay tuned.
Hello, and welcome to the Europass podcast. This podcast is part of the international project Europass, funded from the Horizon Europe Widera program. Europass tackles contemporary issues in memory studies, memory politics, political discourse, and most importantly, public history, a field of study and practice that explores the ways in which the production of knowledge about history can be rendered more democratic, open, collaborative, and empowering, as well as the challenges associated with this process. In this podcast, members of the project team talk to public history practitioners, researchers, historians, activists, filmmakers, and many others about the developments, challenges, and implications of this fascinating approach of dealing with the past. If you would like to know more about the project, follow Europass on Facebook and Twitter. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Europass. My name is Violeta Davoliūtė. I'm a professor at Vilnius University, Institute of International Relations and Political Science, and leader of the Europass project. Today, we will talk about the issue that is critical to nations all over the world, from Lithuania to the US, from India to Peru and beyond: political populism and the misuse of history. These two topics have become synonymous. And today we have an abundance of cases for study and comparison, ranging from non-democratic states like Russia to mature democracies like the United States, with several in-between cases like Hungary and maybe even Poland. To help us plow through these difficult issues, we have two wonderful scholars with us today. And I will start with Jan Kubik, who is a professor of political science at Rutgers University and is a leading authority on the politics of memory. He has published on this topic extensively and more recently has focused on political populism. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And my co-host today is Dovilė Budrytė, a professor at Gwinnett College who has written extensively on the intersection of memory, trauma, and international relations. Dovilė is also a political scientist and the editor-in-chief of Lituanus, the leading American journal on Lithuanian culture, history, and politics. Welcome, Dovilė.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to it.
So, Professor Kubik, let's start with this famous book, 20 Years After Communism, The Politics of Memory and Commemoration, which you published over 10 years ago in 2014, yes. Right? And you co-authored it with Michael Bernhardt, who was with us several months ago. So this book introduced the famous typology of memory actors, mnemonic warriors, mnemonic pluralists, abnegators, and prospectives. So in light of recent developments, such as the rise of new populism, digital media's role in shaping collective memory, and the intensified wars in our region, memory wars in our region, does this typology still stand? What new categories or dynamics might need to be incorporated to capture today's memory politics? A bit of reflection, please.
I believe that this is still pretty valid and useful. We have tried to develop it a little bit more, but I am not sure how to create additional categories. The main conflict is between warriors and pluralists, and that's the kind of a central cleavage in memory politics in many countries. And the key issue is that right-wing populists are warriors of a specific kind. And the issue that I'm now trying to work on a little bit is the more granular set of distinctions between warriors and pluralists.
For our listeners who are not so well familiar with your work, could you describe briefly what these categories are?
Yes. So the idea occurred to us when Michael and I, who our main area of specialty in terms of countries is Poland, and we were having a meeting and talking about what happened at the 20th anniversary of the fall of communism in Poland, which was a very bizarre affair. Namely, there were several celebrations, different members of different parties celebrated separately, the president separately, the prime minister separately. And so the question was, what is going on here? Why is this happening? And by then, I've done already some work on the politics of memory. Michael, of course, worked on civil society and regime change. And we realized that some actors in the field of memory and commemoration are very extreme in the sense that they commit to a single version or vision of history of the nation's past, assert that that's the only valid version, and avoid or reject any possibility of discussion. So the key thing is they assume there is the right, true version of history, and that's the one we have, and all the others are wrong, and moreover, they are dangerous for the shape of the country, of the polity, and so on. Pluralists, by contrast, say, we understand that there are other versions. We understand that we may, in the spirit of true democratic pluralism and moderation, we need to engage with each other, hence there are pluralists. And in a discussion, hopefully, at least two things will happen. Number one, we will establish something that we call mnemonic fundamentals, something that we share. And then we will discuss on the basis of those fundamentals our differences, and maybe even if we don't achieve consensus, we will somehow peacefully agree to disagree in a civilized way. Abnegators, which was and is, I think, an important category, simply say we're not interested in the politics of history. We just don't play that game, and they just do not. And progressives or perspectives, that was our thinking about communism and about Soviet-style socialism, that at that time dominant, or at least asserted to be dominant paradigm of thinking, some version of Marxist-Leninism, was that we need to look to the future. And also the legitimacy of the system was coming from the future. So instead of looking back, the whole philosophy sort of looking into equally, I would say, fictional future as most of those pasts that right-wing populist mnemonic warriors constructed are, to some degree at least, fictional. So those are those four types. And what's left on the stage really with in a very visible and impactful way are pluralists and warriors. And, I believe that this is one of the central issues in the culture war that dominates politics to a large degree these days.
Thank you so much for this very insightful answer. And let us continue with the state of current politics. And right now we talk a lot about populism. So my question will be about populism. How do you see populist movements engaging with historical discourse? Do they primarily distort national histories to serve their political aims? Or do they also reflect on deeper social struggles of identity, recognition, belonging? Right.
So let me, if I may, quickly give you my definition of populism, because
that's helpful.
a term that is used in many different ways. So in the projects I run and in the most recent writing, I define populism in two steps. First, populism. Then second step is right-wing populism. Populism in general has four features in this conceptualization. Number one, the society is seen as divided into two homogeneous, and this is important, homogeneous units, the people and the elite. This is complete sociological fiction because societies are very divided, and the composition of both the people and the elite changes over time, and you have interest groups, you have classes, you have all kinds of strata. We have a complex modern society. The vision is maximally simplifying, right? You cannot go, you could say society, but you'd say, well, there are two elements only in this vision. Second, the relationship between those two elements is antagonism. So they are in some kind of constant conflict. Third, there is the concept of Manichaean dualism. So Manichaeism is the old religion which sees the world as the stage for the conflict between the forces of evil and the forces of good. So we're trying to trace in the populist rhetoric, performances, images, the signs of Manichaean dichotomy. Sometimes they're very prominent, sometimes less so. Fourth feature, very important and sometimes forgotten, is a specific version of volonté générale, the general will of the people, which goes back to Jean-Jacques Rousseau, but it is sort of a bastardized, simplified version, which basically means that the will of the people, now this monolithic, homogeneous people, is knowable. It is known to some actors, particularly charismatic leaders of the movement, who know the will of the people. Moreover, they properly and effectively represent it. And, if the relationship works well, people support them and see them as those kind of messiahs almost of the movement. And then, if you know the will of the people, if you are the proper leader, the only thing that remains to be done is to implement the will of the people, which means, and that's a tremendous consequence of this way of thinking, that the system of checks and balances and constraints by law and, various institutions of the democratic process as we understand them usually is out of the window. It is not applicable. So that's populism. Now, the main axis of conflict in populism is vertical. The people versus the elite. People are good, the elite is bad. This is this Manichaeism. Then, we call it, populism thickens when you introduce the horizontal axis. So you have good people and bad people. Bad people can be the people of different ethnicity, different religion, different race. They can be immigrants, all kinds of people that the doctrine defines as wrong, bad. So that's the picture. That's the kind of basic model of this ideology. So when you think about all those elements, all of them actually, all of them are one way or another touching on some conception of collective identity. Who are the people? Where is the antagonist coming from? How the will of people can be expressed? What is, our particular version of Manichaean binarism, given our history? All of this requires some form of application of some vision of the past. And what comes in is they, of course, pick, to simplify things a little bit, they pick from the possible interpretations, versions of the narrative about the past, they pick those that fit those 5 elements of the doctrine. And so in a way, the ideology drives the selection process of not only which elements of the past are going to be told, but also how they're going to be told. Mm-hmm. And they're going to be told under this more or less powerfully expressed binarism. Hence, they are fitting very nicely the category of memory warriors.
All right. So it's almost like populists are creating Manichaean politics of memory.
Yes, they do. They actually is exactly right. Yes.
Thank you. That's very interesting.
So talking about the engagement with history and these historical falsehoods, what can be done in a democratic country to counter the misuse of history and the circulation of historical falsehoods?
Yeah, that's the question. Well, I guess the answer is education, and I believe very strongly starting perhaps in kindergarten already with little kids, and it should be a part and parcel of democratic education. So, my wife works with little kids, and she believes very strongly that you have to teach the basics of civics, democratic civics, from the very early age on.
But taking examples even from the US, people who are in the government, a lot of them are extremely well educated. They are Harvard graduates, Princeton graduates, and so on. And does not prevent them from, recycling historical falsehoods. So what's happening there? I understand this motto, education, but what do we think when we look at these examples? It's maybe a bit of a digression, but...
No, it's absolutely a key point. And so maybe it tells you something about the quality of education at Harvard and Princeton, I don't know. But and I don't want to be glib, but I believe, I'm thinking about it a lot, what makes people tick? Why do they do things like that, which, look somewhat cynical, at least for some of them.
Yeah.
I am a great kind of follower of Max Weber and some of his categories. And so he has this very useful distinction, my students hear it from me all the time, between value rational and instrumental rational thinking. I assume, because I don't know, I'm not a psychologist and it's not easy to detect, some people believe in this stuff, even if they go through education that should sensitize them to pluralism, democratic debate. They go through those elite institutions, but deep in their hearts, they believe in the truth. There's one truth. Mm-hmm. And at the end, that's who they are. Okay, so we have to assume, that's how the world works. Some are absolutely cynical. They're instrumental rational. And there are many examples. They choose, one of my favorite examples is Viktor Orban, who was, liberal, leaning left, and then figured out at some point in his life that he has a more sort of political field to control on the right side and switched. So it's pretty cynical. It's calculated. I think that Kaczynski, for example, in Poland is more kind of value rational, that he believes some of that stuff, which sometimes sounds a bit kind of bizarre, stretched, like the Polish Catholicism is the cultural material will save Europe for itself and stuff like that. He says those things, right? So what can we do? That's another part of education. Maybe in this case, not historical, but civic, really, rules of proper debate with telling people that the debate is not to win over another person's view, but to truly engage in a common exercise of arriving at some compromise. At the essence of my thinking, no matter how I try to start in whichever way I go, I arrive at the same point. The principal virtue of democracy is moderation. And that goes all the way back to Aristotle. And there's nothing, there's no way around it. Moderation means compromise. Mm-hmm. That's the essential thing that must happen in democracy. And if people refuse to compromise, and those are warriors by definition, right? The other side, pluralists, must do their best to convince the largest segment of the society that the warriors are dangerous to democracy. And I don't have any better answer. It's a constant struggle to try to clearly specify and then implement the rules of the democratic game.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for reminding us the importance of compromise. I think we very often forget this, especially in polarized societies like in the United States today. Definitely compromise sometimes seems to be forgotten. But I'd like to ask about non-democratic countries, right? Because we see this democratic backsliding. We see countries like Russia, where the government seeks to control historical narratives. In those situations, in non-democratic countries, can public history function as a form of resistance?
Well, if they are allowed to function, yes. Yeah. I am a long-time student of social movement protests and rebellions against the oppressive rule. Yeah. Whatever works, it's as long as there is something going on, that people are cultivating more, pluralistic, democratic, more complex thinking. Another thing about the warriors and populists is that they are dichotomizing everything. The reality is not like that. Mm-hmm. We always create some simplified models of reality, but they need to be more complex. There must be a room for shades of gray, for change, for evolution, for some room where a compromise can be built. And that's what we need to try to do and encourage, even if it's looks at a given moment in time hopeless.
Right. So
Putin's regime becomes increasingly oppressive. It's increasingly more difficult, right? But then there's the role of diaspora. We know from the studies of Soviet-type systems that in those countries that eventually managed to move forward, particularly Poland, the diaspora was incredibly important, and the underground publications smuggled or publications from Paris, for example, in the Polish case from the famous publisher Kultura, they were smuggled wherever you could. They were published in small, tiny books. You could put them in your pocket. At the border, they wanted to take them away, but you tried to survive that. And that's how it worked.
That's definitely true about the Lithuanian case. I think we can tell similar stories. But just going back to this question about non-democratic societies and I guess public history, from what I hear you saying is that perhaps public history could be this way to try to break down these Manichaean memory politics, right? Try to,
if there are pluralist public historians,
right?
Because I have a darker view of some public historians who are also warriors.
Can you give examples? Can you give some examples? So
you mean to name names?
Not necessarily, but just which context are you talking about? The U.S. or Poland? Or?
Any context you ask me. Recently I was looking at a lot at Poland, but the United States. Some people who give public lectures, who are historians, or people who write textbooks.
Right.
Like historians who write textbooks for high school. Both in the, as you know, right? We ended up in the situation in the United States where one publishing house publishes different textbook for Texas and different for California.
Yes.
Wow.
Right? One has much more on, say, the civil rights movements, and guess which one, and then slavery than the other. It's horrific because part of the role of history is to build a nation, to create a nation. That literally if you start teaching two different histories, then you are pushing people away from each other. In Poland, there was a major scandal with the textbook produced by the right-wing populist government for high schools. Many teachers refused to teach it.
What happened to it now?
It happened, well, it was in the schools until the election of 2023.
But now not used anymore?
No, now I understand it was removed.
I don't know whether it's relevant or not, but I remembered something. Talking about diaspora, recently I was at a conference in Berlin, and there was a presentation, I think, by Felix Krawczyk. He is a political scientist, from works in Berlin.
Yeah.
And so they did a study on second and third generation Russian migrants and their attitudes towards, narrative of World War II and the Russian war now and so on. And their findings were that the third generation, at least the people that they interviewed, I think 70 or 80 interviews, I'm not sure. This generation is much more attached to these narratives, this heroic narrative of World War II, almost the missionary role of Russia and the USSR, and supportive of the war in Ukraine and so on. Third generation, much more so in their interpretation than their parents. So I'm just wondering, these were people who are born and brought up in a democratic state like Germany. How would you guys interpret it?
Political socialization, right? This is what we teach in political science classes 101. But if I remember correctly, there are many agents of political socialization, and family and religion are more important very, very often than formal education. So I think when we talk about education, we don't just mean formal education, but I think we mean different aspects of education. And if what they're hearing from their parents,
but probably social media too. And
social media too, absolutely.
I think probably even more than their parents, because their parents were more liberal, according to that study. It was not published then. So, but I think there were parents more liberal, so that's also somehow generational.
It's a rebellion. But I think there's another factor in this case, I would suspect, and one would have to study it a little bit more, is the general sense of malaise and for whatever reason, frustration. I can imagine that Russian youth may feel still it may be, third generation can be manufactured to some degree in some sense, but they may feel still out of place. This is not their place. And then the pervasive crisis of liberal democracy, for complex reasons, we can talk about it, is there. And then one of the projects I was running out of London was called Fatigue, right? And there's this kind of democratic fatigue and impatience with the democratic procedures that can be very tedious, slow, and the world is accelerating. They want quick, simple answers. There is, I believe, as an anthropologist, there is a natural tendency to think in binary terms. It's easy and quick. So that's a heuristic, very useful one, right? Oh, this is this is that. I don't need to think about things anymore. So if you put it all together, I'm not surprised at all, because this phenomenon of young, particularly males, moving in the direction of more radical right-wing binary way of thinking is pretty clear across the board around the world. So in a particular case of young Russians, there's this push to binarize, and then which narrative do you grab? Or you grab the, Великая Отечественная война. And that's what, gave us glory. And then, whatever you listen to Putin, who is almost beginning to resurrect Stalin's positive memory. Here you go. It's witch's brew, kind of very scary stuff. Because, that is, of course, for those of us who study those things, you're beginning to think about the 30s.
It's almost like new religion. I mean, this whole war rhetoric, war narrative. And I keep thinking also not just about Russia, but about the United States, how similar narratives about, how the country has to be strong, how it has to be winning wars. I mean, it's a very powerful, can be a very powerful narrative for the right wing.
It is, yes.
Yeah.
But the nuance is disappearing, nuanced thinking, right?
Right. So let's go back, hopefully, to democratic countries. And when it comes to democratic countries, what would you say would be the primary agenda for public history? Does it lie primarily in reclaiming marginalized voices and counter-narratives? For example, African American public history in the United States has played that role for a long time. Or would the primary agenda for public history lie in methodological reshaping of how communities engage with the past in the public sphere?
Well, the first thing, it's really my kind of article of faith that everything that contributes to diversification and complication of stories, up to a reasonable limit perhaps, and i.e. promotion of pluralism is extremely beneficial for people's minds to understand that things are a little bit more complicated than we tend to think in those binary schemes. That's for sure. So yes, marginal voices, new ways of looking at neglected categories of people, women, slaves, minorities, LGBTQ people, and so on, and telling their stories as the best we can. Just, of course, another complex thing, how to tell the story of anything. Methodologically, I this is what I'm going to say tomorrow, I guess, in my keynotes, that I don't
tell us. Do a preview.
No, no, I can. Yes, no, I think that so this point that the methodology of history and the methodology of public history, in terms of writing history, should be the same. Generally, I mean, you can kind of relax maybe some technicalities of the language and so on, but it should be an attempt to preserve that complexity. And my main thing is that the public historian is stretched between two competing principles. One is to do the best history you can. In the old language, will be to really devote yourself to finding the truth, which we now know is not possible. But the best approximation or serious study, complex, paying attention to what's happening in the field of history writing around you, all those professional requirements. And on the other hand, it is someone who is caught in the power struggle, either for good or bad. Either we like them when they're liberal, or we don't like them when not liberal, but it is a power struggle. So, I'm going to be using Foucault, knowledge power, and it was kind of as a inevitable tension in any field, but in public history, tremendous tension. Mm-hmm. So you have to find a balance between telling the story, which is the reflection of the best knowledge that a field of professional historians has at the moment, and then it's a normative choice of the public goal you want to serve, right? And if you are a Democrat, you have to tell the story in a way that reflects that complexities and so on. But I see many historians who, sometimes prominent, who become public historians, and they are warriors. They just go for a binary story. And so that field of public history, to my mind, is pretty much split ideologically as any other field. There's no difference there.
Right, and I guess then we have to think about silences that occur in such a struggle where, some stories almost inevitably become silenced. If this is...
Absolutely, yeah. The binaries requires silencing.
That's right.
Too much, yeah. So, yeah.
You partially answered another question that we had, whether you believe that participatory and inclusive forms of public engagement with the past meaningfully slow down or even reverse processes of democratic erosion. And if so, then under what social or institutional conditions, we wanted to ask.
So yeah, they can if they are democratic and pluralistic. Right. If they're not, then they make the problem worse. So I'm not kind of Pollyannish about public historians being something immune to being ideologically divided and so on. What was the last part of the question?
Under what social or institutional conditions?
Okay. Yeah, I have my kind of favorite answer, at least for now. It has to be autonomy from governmental power. The democracy requires what I called functional differentiation of the public sphere, meaning various professions, groups should be self-governing and autonomous as much as possible, at the same time ready to collaborate with other autonomous and self-governing entities. This is what right-wing populists immediately attack. The diversity of the public sphere, the diversity of civil society, and they try to centralize. They are centralizers, right? Trump is a perfect example of, he tries to now run everything from the White House, which is incredibly dangerous for American democracy. So the precondition is, association of public historians, self-governing. For good or bad, they may become warriors. Then, the only really serious democratic solution is that other people will create another association, which will be pluralist, and let them compete. I mean, that would be the democratic way. I mean, it sounds somewhat idealistic, but otherwise we are entering the territory of sort of mutual destruction.
Right. So back to, I guess, the importance of civil society that we talked so much about, in Lithuania too, in early 90s, and when democracy was consolidating, and now we are talking about this importance not just in the so-called emerging democracies, but even countries like the United States, where it's clear that that there's a real danger, I think. Yeah.
Would you like to ask some follow-up questions?
So, how worried are you about democratic backsliding? I mean, we talked a lot about public history being maybe a way to try to at least promote some democratic norms. I mean, and avoid Manichaean memory politics. But how worried are you that perhaps internationally we're moving towards even more democratic backsliding that we have seen so far?
The funny thing is, as I told you earlier, I have to teach my class online today, and today's topic is democratic backsliding.
We are lucky.
So I'm kind of up on my readings. I'm very worried. Yes, and of course I'm not the only one. That somehow the pro-liberal democratic side is dispersed. I don't see the kind of a clear, focused energy. It's a very difficult problem because, we talked about the necessity of pluralism, diversity for democracy, but then concerted action in the moments of crisis demands centralization, right? So it's a certain paradox. It's a difficult thing because once people centralize, then it may be difficult to decentralize again. But the true Democrats should act like that. There's, as the Bible teaches, there's a time for everything. So there's time for getting together, removing the differences and focusing in a clear way on the goal, which is resist something that, increasingly people begin to see as fascization of politics, right, in several countries, or certainly a strong move to the far right. So public history here has the role, like many other areas, to join in and as much as possible explain that a complex, nuanced thinking about our own common past is a hugely important weapon for the struggle for preserving democracy. But that's it sounds very simple, but you have to avoid situations where the binarist warriors win. Yesterday, to my horror, I read my student sent me an article from The Guardian. And my colleague, a younger colleague, a historian at Rutgers, at my very good department of history, resigned or is moving to Europe because he was denounced as someone who creates dangerous environment at the university because he's anti-fascist. And he was denounced by that organization that Charlie Kirk created, local chapter at Rutgers, denounced him to, all over the media, particularly Fox News, of course, that they do not feel safe because in his analysis, I don't know what he said and how it was written, but they feel that they are, I guess that's my reconstruction, but understand that they feel that they were labeled fascists or something like that, which in the article he denies. That he was just teaching about the dangers of far right for democracy, and they feel unsafe, poor things, so they denounced him. That is completely unthinkable, in a democratic society. Because you cannot create we know it from communism. You cannot have a culture where you are afraid, you don't know who is going to denounce you, and then you may have the consequences may touch your family. And this is what's happening in the United States now, right? So it is absolutely unacceptable and completely insane and extremely dangerous. If they don't like what he's saying, then go and debate it with him. I'm pretty sure he'll be very happy. Open discussion, take position, fine. But the culture of denunciation and this kind of now right-wing cancellation is absolutely detrimental to the quality of public life. So
I would like to end on a more positive note. So what inspiring examples do you see in Europe? Something positive, maybe something that is happening in Poland. We talked about the US quite a bit. We talked about Russian Federation, this and that. Surely there are some inspiring examples. Maybe something's happening in Poland and we don't know it, or somewhere else.
So, part of my personal interest, but also this work, is my interest in museums and new museums. And Poland has a fantastic explosion of award-winning museums. And, I can name three the major ones. One is the Polin Museum of the History of Jewish Life in Poland, the Museum of Solidarity, which is very close to my heart. I collaborate with them a little bit. This is the most phenomenal museum of any social movement in the world. As far as I know, there's nothing even close. It's a huge, beautiful center based on the very positive, pluralistic memory of the Solidarity movement, which was phenomenal. And it promotes the sort of open culture of debate, exchange, discussion. On the gates of the museum is on the doorway, it's a little poster that says Europe begins here. Right? And then there's the Museum of World War II in Gdańsk also, which is fantastic. And, the main story of the museum is that the war is a horror. It brings suffering. And the right-wing government didn't like it too much. They started tinkering with the exhibition, which was kind of illegal, speaking about autonomy of the museum creators and so on. And I have it in my documentation. One right-wing politician defending those moves said the war is not that bad. I'm paraphrasing, but roughly. The war is not that bad because it does two things. It builds nations and shapes good characters. So this is sheer insanity, to think like that, right? And the museum, of course, shows the tremendously complex suffering of Poland. Of course, Poland suffered tremendously, but others suffered too, right? And so there's too much also international history. The criticism was too many things about, Japanese rape of Chinese women, or what the other things that happened in World War II. And then the Poles voted right-wing populists out of power, and the museums were returned to. Actually, the Solidarity Museum was never taken over by the right-wing government, mostly because of the institutional setup. The museum is mostly funded by the city of Gdańsk, and has additional separate funding. The central government contributes some, and there was a moment where the central government removed its funding from the Solidarity Center, and there was a call to collect money online on Facebook. And I don't want to exaggerate, but a very short period of time, 48 hours, something like that, people collected enough money to cover the gap.
Wow.
And that's the example of action. And I was there 2 months ago for the 45th anniversary of the Solidarity Accords from August 1980. And it is still this beautiful, vibrant place full of various activities, teaching activities. They designed, I think I got the numbers right, they designed a museum for 300,000 visitors a year, and they are way more than 2 million.
Yeah.
So they are kind of hardly managing, but it is just, that's the example. Very positive.
It's a great museum.
Yep.
I love
All
that.
right. So I think with these positive examples,
Yep.
we could probably end our conversation today. Thank you very much, Professor Jan Kubik. Thank you, Dovilė, and best of luck to you.
Thank you. And to
Thank
you.
We hope you enjoyed this bonus episode. You can find more Europast episodes on YouTube and Spreaker, and learn more about the project at europast.vu.lt. Thanks for listening and subscribing to Baltic Ways. See you next time.